Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending our webinar, How the Hiring Process Really Works, and Insider's Guide to Getting the Job. My name is Alex Baran-Perea. I'm with Exec. Before I introduce our presenter this afternoon, Caroline Levine, I want to very quickly just go over a few logistical items to make sure that our webinar runs as smoothly as possible. We're expecting quite a huge turnout, actually. And as a result, what we've done is anyone who is on this webinar will actually be muted. And we're doing this really just to make sure that the quality of the sound is as good as possibly can be. That being said, Caroline certainly wants to have you as the attendees really ask questions throughout the webinar. One thing that you'll find on your control panel is a chat box. And if you just take a second to find it, and feel free to send questions, comments, any issues with audio to the chat box. You'll be able to address those questions to, I believe, to the organizers and the panelists. And so definitely be sure to include both the organizers and the panelists so that both Caroline and myself, we can see the questions and any comments that you have. You should be given the option to either use voice over IP or to dial in directly through a phone line. So if you are experiencing issues with one audio platform, I definitely recommend that you switch to the other one and just to test to see if that will improve the audio and the sound for you. And again, as I mentioned, at any point, should you have any questions, feel free to use the chat box so that we can address them at the appropriate time. And so with that, another thing to also keep in mind is during the beginning of the webinar, Caroline will be asking a few poll questions. So we're going to try to make this a little bit more interactive for everyone. During those poll questions, you'll see the question pop up. Do definitely provide your input to those questions, which will only help Caroline really tailor and direct the webinar in the direction that it should go and based upon the information that you provide. So be on the lookout for those poll questions. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Caroline. Caroline Levine and her partner, Connie Thanasoulis of SixFigureStart, are Fortune 500 recruiters with a little over, actually well over 40 years of experience working in the industry. They offer really action-oriented advice on what employers really want from their candidates, and their industry expertise includes financial services, consulting, media, pharmaceuticals, technology, etc. They really specialize in coaching recent graduates on creating really powerful resumes, interview, networking skills, job search strategies, particularly through the various platforms that are now made available to everyone. So Caroline and Connie really bring a wealth of experience. We're definitely really excited to have Caroline with us once again as part of our webinar series for 2010. And certainly a number of members of Exec have gone on to leverage Connie's resources beyond just the webinar, and we'll be sure to follow up with more information about Caroline and SixFigureStart should you be interested in connecting with her directly at some point in the future. So with that, Caroline, I'm going to go and hand it over to you.
Okay. Great, Alex. And you know, I forgot to mention, I don't know when you're going to launch the poll questions. So just whenever you feel like, I didn't embed them in the presentation. So whenever
Sure. Yeah. I actually have, I can launch them on my end at any point, Caroline, whenever you want. Just let me know.
Yeah. So yeah, whenever you feel like it, maybe while I'm doing the intro and the agenda, if you want to just launch it so that we can collect some statistics and I can look at the results as we go along. That's fine.
Sure. Okay, go ahead. I'll go ahead and launch the first poll question. Perhaps you can go ahead and start your intro.
Great. So the agenda for today's call, how the hiring process really works, I'm going to introduce myself, do a little housekeeping. I think Alex did all of the housekeeping for today. I'm going to give a little bit about the state of the market, talk about the 8 steps of the job search from the employer's perspective, and then the 6 steps of the job search from the job seeker's perspective. And, you know, toggle back and forth between the two so that you can really see, you know, what we're seeing, you know, when I was a recruiter, what I would be experiencing behind the desk, and how that, impacts you as a potential candidate. And then finally, a summary checklist of lessons learned so that you can walk off this call and have, one or two or more actionable steps to take your job search, further. In terms of introduction, I think, like Alex had mentioned, SixFigureStart is a career coaching firm that isn't comprised entirely of former Fortune 500 recruiters. So our perspective is entirely based on the employer's perspective, that really there are specific tactical things that job seekers can do to help themselves, in the process in terms of getting to the right employers, in terms of making the right approach, positioning themselves, talking about themselves, troubleshooting their search and fixing problems along the way, and then, of course, negotiating and closing the offer. I myself have almost 15 years of recruiting, first in retained executive search, where I focused on the management consulting industry, and the clients included Accenture, Booz Allen, Oliver Wyman, the Monitor Group. And then I went in-house and I ran several recruiting areas, including university relations, for Time Inc., the magazine publishing company. My business partner, Connie Thanasoulis, ran both sometimes experienced staffing groups, but also university relations for first Citigroup, then Warner Lambert, and then Merrill Lynch, before we co-founded SixFigureStart in the fall of 2007. We both teach professional development at Columbia University. We write for CNBC.com, Vault.com, and other outlets, and we've been quoted in a number of media outlets. And actually, a couple weeks ago, I was on CBS Money Watch talking about the state of the market and how things are definitely improving. So that's a picture of me, just so you can get a sense for, we can feel like we're talking voice to voice, or perhaps this is a live workshop with my background. I think I talked enough about where I'm coming from in terms of my perspective on the job search. In terms of housekeeping, again, Alex talked about, I think a recording is going to be available for everybody who registered for this call. This material is copyrighted to SixFigureStart, and the downloads and the recordings are for your individual or personal use only and not licensed for broadcast. But if you'd like to license it, you can get in touch with me. In terms of state of the market, so I think we've all heard media and press talking about high unemployment, over 10%, and depending on the segment, close to 20%. And if you really counted everyone who's trying to look for a job and, people who've dropped out from looking for a job, it is definitely closer to that 20%. What's interesting is I would say that as early as the summer of last year, so about a year ago, I was starting to see some movement and hear some movement from my recruiting colleagues, which was interesting because the summer is typically a slow time. And that continued into the fall, into the winter. And I think the most interesting thing that's happening right now is that I'm hearing about a lot of recruiting jobs. So what's interesting is that companies are now beginning to hire recruiters, which means they are making a commitment to recruiting in the future. The jobs that I had been hearing about last year, for the most part, were project management type of jobs, leadership positions. So definitely, the positions that really had to be filled to get anything going. But the fact that companies are opening up recruiting jobs, again, indicates a long-term commitment to hiring. And what that means for job seekers, I'm not the only one that's going to be sensing this. And what's tricky is that when the employed people sense that the market is now ripe for, dipping their toe back in, all of the employed people who have since been, miserable because of all the cuts, and now they're doing 2 or 3 people's jobs, morale is very low, and employers were really able to get the best of them for a long time. They're going to feel more confident in the market. They're going to start, again, dipping their toe back into the market, and they will become the competition. And so even though there are going to be more jobs, likely what we'll be feeling in the next 6 to 12 months is that it's going to feel even more competitive. because of these employed people streaming into the marketplace. And so you have to remember that, yes, companies are ready to hire now. The time to make sure you dust off your job search technique is now. But don't be fooled into thinking that it's going to be, somewhat of an easier search. I think in many ways it's going to be a tougher search. And so it's something to think about as we go through the different stages that an employer is looking at as they fill jobs so that you know how to position yourself. So let's talk about these 8 steps that I'm talking about from the employer's perspective. Okay, so I'm not even thinking about any of you on the call right now. I'm thinking about I am back in my shoes as a recruiter, and we are going to be, recruiting for jobs. And essentially, this is what happens, right? An opening is defined. The budget for the opening is approved. Those are 2 separate steps. People seem to forget that. And, we'll talk about why that's important. I mean, in a nutshell, why that's important is because a lot of times in a volatile market, a need is identified, and yet a company can't hire for that need because the budget isn't released yet. So there's a gap between the company knowing that they need something and the search being launched. And so a job seeker who's really, really well networked that can get in sometime between that gap can really, have a lot of lead time before the posting, gets public. And that's step 3, is that the search, kicks off. So the budget gets approved, and then it trickles down to recruiting, and they say, okay, we need to fill this position of PR manager or marketing manager or sales assistant or whatever it is that they're looking for. And as you can see here, the search kicks off is really where, the job seeker, most job seekers are coming in. They're seeing a job that's posted. They get a call from a recruiter. They see it on the company website. And yet, the actual genesis of the job is already, 2 steps before that. So in steps 1 and 2 is where that hidden job market is. The search has kicked off, and so now resumes are coming in. At this point, we are screening the resumes, and we are selecting people to be interviewed. Now, keep in mind, selecting people to be interviewed, it's not just from resumes that are being screened. There might be a whole mess of people up at the top who came in through networking, again, through that hidden job market, who recognized that there was an opening, waited patiently for the green light to go, and have throw their hat in the ring, either getting referred by an employee or, again, networking their way in. So candidates are selected for interviews not just from the resume screen, but that's, in that stage as well. We conduct interviews. These are our first round general interviews. Unless you're talking about the tiniest company in the world, I mean, we're not going to have just 1 round of interviews. So there's going to be a pre-screen, typically with recruiters or with HR, before we get to step 6, where here I put finalists are selected as if it's just a 2-stage process. This can obviously be a multiple-stage process. So there's step 5 where it's that first screen, and then I would say step 6 is that subsequent, depending on how many rounds there could be 2, 4, 8, 22 rounds of interviews I've heard about, but it's that whole subsequent interview process until we get down to picking who our finalists are. And then, an offer is extended and negotiated with one of these finalists. And then finally, and let's say the person accepts, because if the person doesn't accept, by the way, so we're back here to step 7 again, we essentially repeat by either picking the runner-up finalist, or we have to go back to step 3. The search is kicking off, and we're looking for new folks. But we're assuming, step 7 ends when someone accepts, and then the search really ends when the person walks through the door. I've had people renege on their offer acceptances, the day of or the night before. It's happened to many, many recruiters. I've been recruiting long enough that I've seen this kind of behavior. So the search, isn't really over. We might have closed out candidates by then. For the most part, we absolutely have, because it's the night before someone is starting. But again, you just never know as a candidate, and I'll bring that up again when I go through the job seeker's perspective. So those are the 8 steps, and that's what you're seeing. And so let me just go into a little bit more detail about, what that means for you. I pointed out the first and the second step are things that happen. The opening is defined and the budget is approved, well before the search is posted. So the search is private at this point, and the search isn't even in HR. Unless the opening is defined within HR, we're looking for a compensation person or a generalist or a benefits person. If we're looking for, the examples I gave before, a PR manager or a marketing manager or a sales assistant or whatnot, that's going to happen in the PR department, the marketing department, the sales group, and not in HR. So the fact that searches don't begin there really illustrates the point that I'm a recruiter. I obviously have respect for recruiters, but I always tell my clients, if you have a choice and if you are not going for a recruiting or HR job, don't talk to recruiters. You're trying to get to the hiring manager. So the search begins with the actual hiring department. And unless the salary is covered by HR, so remember step 2, the budget is approved. Now, sometimes it is approved through HR. So in some of these big companies, so Time Inc., for example, had a management training program, and that budget was housed within HR. So I had actually a lot of control over the hiring for that program, even though those hires were then deployed throughout the different magazines. Unless that is happening, again, most of the control, especially in the beginning of the search and the decisions, are still going to be not in HR. So therefore, again, try to get to that hiring department. Your chances are improved if you can access the line managers in the hiring department and not necessarily HR. And so what is really critical for you is this networking. I've seen statistics. Networking accounts for 80 to 85% of the job leads that lead to an actual hire. So if you are spending, a lot of time on job postings and on recruiters hoping that they are going to help you, just recognize that you are tapping into 15 to 20% of, the viable job options. So think about that as you manage your time. Now remember that step 3, so now we're past that early stage, and step 3 says, we are going to kick this search off. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to definitely post it on our website. We might post it on an external website. We might post it on an Ivy Exec or on a Monster or, or on LinkedIn. We might disperse it through social media. We might take out a printed ad. We might highlight it on our intranet and say to employees, again, depending on the company and how they do it, but many companies have employee referral programs. Or we might outsource the search entirely to an executive search firm for a senior level search or perhaps for an agency. And whether or not a search gets outsourced, really it depends on so many different factors. And even in that case where we will outsource the search, if I'm a recruiter on the inside, it's still then the internal HR, internal recruitment that typically manages that relationship with the search firm. Not always. Sometimes when I was recruiting for the management consulting industry, a lot of the management consulting firms would have specific partners or practice heads interacting with the external search agency. So you can see that there's a whole gaggle of places that you might need to tap to see where these jobs are public. You want to be hitting these areas, but remember that sweet spot is before the search is even posted, because that's when you have less competition. Now, employee referrals is something that is a big, 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 big deal. It's the reason why companies spend a lot of money. I'm consulting to a company right now on their recruitment strategy. They have set aside over 50% of their recruiting budget to pay for employee referral bonuses. It's that important to the recruitment efforts of that company. And it's a nonprofit company. So, they're spending money on these employee referrals. They recognize that this is a critical way of getting good hires. So your chances are greatly improved if you can get introduced, by someone who knows folks. And so again, I said before, networking is key to accessing jobs before they become public. Networking is key here, even when a job becomes public, even when it's posted. We gave definitely more emphasis on people who were referred by people who are already at the company. A side benefit of being referred by someone in the company is that you can get a lot of information from that employee who's referring you. You can get information about the culture of the firm, about who exactly is going to be on the search team that's going to be making the decision for this hire, so that you can really tailor yourself and target yourself to position yourself in the right way for all of the influencers of the search, not just the immediate hiring manager who is named, say, in the posting, or may not be named. And so that's another reason why you want to have these employee referrals. So step 4, the resume screening process. Look, I would say, spent 5 to 10 seconds skimming a resume. I don't know any recruiter who spent more time than that. The reality is that we are just inundated by resumes. I always gave a resume a second glance if it was referred to me by somebody. So again, I can't stress enough those employee referrals. But in a nutshell, because it's a skimming factor, we don't start reading until we're really trying to think, more deeply about the candidate. So in terms of just think about, what do you need to do to make sure that your resume is skimmable? If you glance at your resume, are you going to be able to lock into the names of the companies, the titles? Are the titles evident, very evident what it is that you've done? So do you have accomplishments that are front and center? Are they at the top? Because we might stop reading after the first few lines. Obviously, you want something that is searchable in terms of technical or functional keywords. A lot of the big companies will use resume filtering software. I always did both, where I used a filter to, cut down some of the searching, but then always, when I had time, would go back and read resumes manually, thinking that, maybe there was something that I missed. But keep in mind that, especially for technology jobs, those were great for filtering. And so if you have a very technical job, just know that you're probably going to be put through a filter like that. Obviously, typos and grammatical mistakes, and it's not so much what people think. It's not that we're looking for them and hoping to knock you out. It's just, again, we're skimming the resume, so if something looks out of place and just makes us laugh, it's just going to look so unprofessional. Don't forget dates. I'm not going to call someone and ask them to walk me through their dates if the dates have fallen off or if they're not there. If you list your cell phone and I decide to call you to try to schedule you for an interview, and I call you and it's an unprofessional message, just remember, everything that you're going to be listing for your job search now becomes part of your professional marketing campaign. So that includes your email address, and that includes your email signature and your voicemail message. So just be really, really buttoned up, because in the resume screening and that scheduling process where we're thinking we're going to call people in, if I get an unprofessional message or it's really hard for me to schedule someone, I've had so many candidates who get knocked out of the process just for that. We just say, oh, forget it, it's okay, we've already filled the position. And I will say, if you line up 10 recruiters and you poll them about this one-page, two-page stuff, you'll get a variety of different answers. Just recognize that the most conservative strategy is the one-page resume because, again, of the skimming factor and the fact that there are a number of recruiters who feel very strongly about one page, and certainly for less than, I would say, 10 years of experience as the cutoff. Again, let's talk about resume screening, and I'm going to take it from a different angle here. What I would say is that if you are a candidate that doesn't get called in and you're doing a lot of dropping your resume, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad candidate. What it might mean is that there's something about your profile that just isn't conducive to being selected from the resume. And here are some examples. A career changer. You have to write who you are. So if you've had 10 years of experience in financial services and you're trying to move into luxury goods, you're just not going to get through a resume screen. It's just not going to happen. Doesn't mean you're not going to get hired eventually. You're not going to network your way in, talk to someone who's willing to listen and tell them your story in a way that they're willing to hear. Certainly that could be the case. But in terms of dropping your resume and getting called in, it's just not going to happen. Job gaps. If you've been unemployed for a while, if you have a year or two or more missing, it's going to be something that's going to keep you from getting called in. If you have companies that aren't recognizable, remember I said, we're skimming. We're looking for brand name companies. If it's a company that's not recognizable, or if it's what I call the notorious company, an Enron, something where there might be a stigma, where there might be a visceral reaction, that might be enough to just get you skipped over. If there's a geography issue, so if the job is in, say, New York, and I see someone with a California address, and I'm thinking, oh, we're not going to pay for a relocation, and I'm not going to be able to fly this person in, and I know that my hiring manager client wants to see people. They're not just going to do a phone interview. So I just strike the person for that reason alone. Or I know that we're not going to sponsor, and everything listed on the resume is international work experience, and I have a question about permanent work authorization, that might be enough to skip over as well. So you can see that none of these reasons mean that someone is a bad candidate, but it just means that they're not going to get through the resume screen. So just recognize this is what we are doing as recruiters. We are filtering very, very quickly, ruthlessly, efficiently. Okay. The interview process. So remember, we were through the first 4 steps. We've defined the opening. The budget has been approved. We've posted the job. We collect the resumes, and we start scheduling people to come in. Now, step 5 is that first round interview process. But that's actually not what I'm talking about here. I'm still on step 4, where the candidates are being selected and we're calling them in. Keep in mind that that is when all of those little interactions, those count as mini interviews. When I call you and I'm trying to schedule you, if you sound harried, if you don't have your date book ready, or there's a lot of noise and you sound really scattered and unsure of yourself, I'm going to remember that. Remember that these small conversations are a reflection of your poise and professionalism, presentation, your communication skills, your work ethic in terms of how quickly you can get back to me, your motivation in terms of how quickly you can get back to me, right? So if I don't hear from someone, definitely, within, say, 28, 48 hours, at the most, it's going to be assigned to me, oh, this person probably got something else. I mean, this person's not interested in speaking to me. And remember, as we slide into, an interview, especially if it's an interview that's quick over the phone, if we start talking and I just start asking you, so, I got your resume, from our website, and I see that you've applied to XYZ. Are you still looking? And I'm starting a conversation, that again is an interview. So I haven't perhaps formally invited you to come into the office, but I am checking you out. And keep in mind that it's an opportunity for you as well to ask me questions. So if the job description at that point to you wasn't clear, or you're not clear as I'm inviting you in which job I'm inviting you in for, or who exactly you're going to meet, is this an HR first round, you have to block out a day, remember, these are the types of things that you should ask about. And finally, this is a long-term relationship, okay? So after every interaction, you want to be grateful for that and send a thank you note for that. It doesn't have to be for the scheduling call, obviously, but certainly thinking about every one of these interviews thereafter. And because you don't really know how long the process is going to be going, think long-term. I know that I only had broken out the interviews in 2 steps. I said, well, the first round interview and then the finalists. But the reality is that what I'm talking about is an interview process that might go, many, many, many rounds. So I said the interview process starts early with the selection. The interview process ends later than you might think. Okay, so I'm talking about those rounds that go 22, 23 people. Gosh, when is this going to end? You want to try to find that out. Okay, they might not know. The company might not know. There were many instances where I intended to have a 2-round process, where I intended to try to schedule everyone who was going to be involved in the decision that day, and it just didn't work out, either for scheduling reasons or perhaps it turned out that the role might have a dotted line to another group. It would make sense to bring in someone from that other group. It would make sense for more decision makers to come in. Sometimes we don't know that. But what you really want to do in this, throughout the interview process is to find out what is the process. At every stage, what is the next step from here? When can I expect to hear back? You want to get details of the process so you know how to pace yourself. You also want to get some indication of how they're going to define success. So how will you know you made the right hire? How will you know this person is successful 30 days from now, 60 days from now, 120 days from now, 365 days from now? You're essentially creating a roadmap for yourself if you get the job so that you know exactly what milestones to hit, but also so that when you are going into these subsequent interviews, you have a sense for these are the metrics that this person is going to be measured against. And so I need to make sure, having found that out in an earlier interview, that I reframe all of my talking points that I've so diligently practiced in my interview technique, so that I've reframed them so that I'm positioning them against these success metrics, these success definitions. And then finally, the third kind of category of question is, why me and why not me, the flip side of that. So what is it, and you can even ask this outright, what was it about my resume that enticed you to call me in? Or is there anything about my candidacy at this point that gives you hesitation to hire me? How many other people are you talking to, and what do some candidates have? What do other candidates have that you might not see in my background right now? What can I do to improve my chances? Or, again, how you frame that stylistically is going to depend a lot on who you're talking about and on your personality. It's something that, when I am coaching clients, it's different for every single client, for every single situation. It really is going to depend on the how it's going with the interview, again, who they're talking to, the personality and the style of the client, what they can get away with. And when I say client, in this case, I'm talking about coaching client. I'm thinking about you guys at this point. So those are the three, question categories: the process, the success metrics, and then, your advantages, disadvantages. And, key things to remember, help the employer help you. In other words, find out from them, what they're looking for, so that you can then repeat back, in a way that they're going to understand and in a way that they're going to appreciate, your experience. Show them, don't tell them. So give examples, give concrete examples. And, on our blog, which is just the front page of our website, we write a lot of career advice articles, and one of them is 5 steps to comprehensive interview examples. And so if you just do a search on the blog for comprehensive, because that's such an odd word, it will probably bring up that particular blog piece, which I wrote quite a while ago. But it's the 5 things that I really walk through all of my coaching clients to make sure that every time they talk about a project, they will hit these 5 points. And Master the Interview Part 2 is actually part of a series. I used to do these types of webinars in sequence, so I'm actually repeating back to a sequential webinar that's on our website, but that isn't part of a previous slide here. It's not over until someone starts, so just remember I made that connection before. Remember I talked about the search is over for me as the recruiter when the person is onboarded. Before that, I was always afraid that someone might renege their acceptance or something would change and we'd have to start the search over. So as you are going through this extra long interview process, remember that you're planting seeds for a relationship that you would like to come back to even after the search is over, because you might come back to the search just to thank them for considering you, knowing that it's over, and then lo and behold, you find out that whoever they hired didn't work out. Okay, so that's kind of that long, drawn-out interview process. Now, the finalists are selected stage. Just remember, the final rounds are different than that very first round general interview. Okay, so this is related to the interview process ending later than you think. The interview really ends for us, on our perspective, when a candidate starts their job. At any point before that, the search to us is still open. We are always going to be interviewing folks at different stages. I might be having a first-round interview with Joe, and Jane is well on her way through the process. And I'm still looking through resumes because I'm not sure Jane is going to get through and she's going to stick. So just remember, you don't know where the company is. You've got to keep your energy high throughout the process. You don't take anything for granted, and you focus on getting that offer. That is your job. You don't sit there through interviews and start thinking, do I really want to work here? Do I really want this job? What's the meaning of life? You don't want any doubts about the job or about yourself to creep up into your head. The purpose of interviewing is to establish a relationship. That's the long-term purpose. The immediate purpose is to get that job offer. You can always say no. I would rather have a whole bunch of terrible job offers than no job offers, because I might decide that a job offer is just okay for now, or there might be something that I learn later on that all of a sudden, hey, you know, I wouldn't mind working here. This is actually better than I thought. So don't be too judgmental through the process. Focus on getting that offer. Remember who you've met along the way. Okay, so this is really key, especially for processes that go on and on and on. One of the first questions that I ask when it's someone who's kind of midstream or later stage in the process, I say, so who have you met already? And it's amazing to me, I would say a good half of the time, people don't know. They don't, I mean, it's not that they don't know. They'll say, you know, I need to look that up. Or they'll be able to remember some of the folks, and then they'll say, oh, I also remembered, and they're thinking. You know, review it before you get there. Really be able to tell the interview, I met with so-and-so, this is what we talked about. It really shows that you're engaged, that you're professional, that you're organized. Keep sending those thank you notes. I mentioned thank you notes before. And remember long-term relationships. Okay. So now we're still on my side. We're still, you know, we're at the final stage. We extend an offer. We pick someone, we extend an offer. Typically it's a verbal offer, and then we follow up with a written offer. You definitely want to get that written offer because you want to be able to see, you know, what all the things are in that offer so that you know exactly what you can negotiate against. And I mentioned some of the things here, not just salary, but, you know, the components of salary. So the base salary, you know, the components of what I should say the compensation package is salary, sign-on bonus, year-end bonus, the speed of your promotion. If you can get a review or a promotion meeting 6 months into it instead of 12 months into it, that can add up to real money for you. If you can get benefits, say early vesting into 401k or early participation into you know, a bonus plan, that's money, you know, that's not in a base salary. If you can get them to contribute, you know, tuition or retirement or whatnot, that's something you can negotiate for. Your decision date is negotiable, okay? So it's not even just about cash or, you know, like cash items. You know, you are negotiating boundaries, your decision date, things like that. So just remember that in the offer phase, you know, really pay attention. Keep your energy high. keep researching, keep networking. This will give you the market perspective that you need. Remember that your ability to negotiate is going to depend on how much knowledge you really have about what is customary for that company and what is customary for that role. But finally, and I can't stress this enough, it's, a lot of candidates, they really, really blow it at this stage. I would say at the finalist stage more than the offer stage, but, they feel it. They feel that they've got it already. And all sorts of bad behavior comes out, negative behavior. Perhaps it's just the self-doubt creeping in, but you've got to stay professional and upbeat. We're still interviewing you. We can pull that offer away. Now, I'm not trying to scare you into saying that, don't negotiate. We're going to pull the offer because you negotiate. That's definitely not true. But negotiate in good faith and negotiate in an upbeat way. Remember, you're going to have to work with us if you do get the offer. Even if you get what you want, I mean, you want the employer to feel like they also got something that they wanted. Onboarding, so again, looking at it from the employer's point of view, we wait till the person walks through the door just to remember all of these things in terms of having to fill out all of this paperwork. I'm in a situation right now, the place that I'm consulting to on their recruiting strategy, one of the things we have to change is their offer letter and onboarding process because they extended an offer to someone that doesn't have the right work authorization for what they are looking to do. And that just wasn't clear in the way the interview process unfolded. And so, again, this is someone who's at the onboarding stage. We might have to start the search, for them all over again. So all of these things you need to think about: employment paperwork, the HR policies and procedures, benefit selection, training and development opportunities. It was always amazing to me about people who were so relieved to get a job that they overlooked, really all of the orientations and all of the communication about special perks and benefits that a company offered. When I was at Time Inc., I often knew about things like, discounted movie tickets or free admission into, cultural, landmarks within the city. And I found out all of these things because I knew to look for them, and there were some employees who had been there for years and years who didn't know about any of these things. So it's just interesting how people don't pay attention to that onboarding process. Now I'm going to flip a little bit, and I'm just going to talk about the job search from your perspective, just to highlight where it crosses into the recruiter's perspective. So for a job seeker, this is the approach that we use, the 6-step approach that we use for all of our coaching clients. We have coached people who are current students looking for a plum internship, and I'm currently coaching a CEO who just sold his company and is looking to do something new. And in all of these things, you have to identify your target. And the reason why this is so important from the employer's perspective is that how are you going to access that hidden job market unless you are very pointedly networking your way in and knowing, what you're looking for. You're trying to uncover specific positions. How are you going to know what types of positions unless you for yourself have identified, what you are targeting? When you create your marketing campaign, your resume, your cover letters, your online profile, again, it's with the understanding that the search is starting, not in HR. So your marketing communication has to be written with the hiring manager in mind. It has to get to the hiring manager. And your resume has to follow all of those things, that easily screenable, skimmable format that I was talking about. When you do your research, you're researching obviously to confirm your targets, to refine your positioning, but remember, you're researching because you're trying to uncover when those openings are defined and where those budgets are approved. Right? So you're really trying to draw almost an organizational chart of the companies that you're looking for. And your networking and your interviewing technique has to match the fact that the scheduling process is a mini interview, so the interviewing is starting much earlier than you think, and it ends much later than you think. So it really has to be timed in a way that you know intuitively how to ask those 3 questions, those 3 types of questions that I told you to ask, that there is someone there who is mentoring you and reminding you to ask those questions. We always tell our clients to debrief with us right after an interview when it's fresh, so we can figure out, okay, what are some of the things they might have stumbled on, so we can fix that in the thank you and the follow-up process where there's still a chance to perhaps turn it around. Step 5, from the job seeker's perspective, is you need to stay motivated and organized. Remember, keep your energy high. We're looking at energy throughout the process. And you want to be troubleshooting your job search. And you want to have enough data in terms of who you're networking with, who you've interviewed with, what did they ask you, where you might have done well, where you didn't do well, so that you can be auditing your search along the way. Unfortunately for us as coaches, we often get clients who have already exhausted a lot of their leads before they come to us. Fortunately, that means that they've got, sometimes a lot of data that we can work with in terms of, what's been happening, and we can really try to figure out where this is all going wrong. And then finally, negotiate and close the offer. So you can see this is really where your process meets my process as the recruiter, if you will, in that we're both negotiating on either side. We're both trying to get to closure on the search, and so we really want the same thing. Remember, relationships, be professional, be upbeat. So in terms of absolute next steps, so we have a few minutes for questions. Are you getting to those employers before the search kicks off? Look at the search that you're doing now and really be honest with yourself and say, oh my goodness, I don't have any of these types of leads that Caroline is talking about, where someone might be able to tell me that there is an opening that's on the horizon or budget's going to be freed up for a particular search. I have absolutely no idea, how to even have that conversation or where I would find that information. Be honest with yourself if you're not getting to that hidden job market. And, because then you'll know, okay, then you're going to have to tweak your networking and your research to try to fix that. Are you staying front of mind throughout all the steps? We have an 8-step process, okay, and we're at different stages with different candidates. So just because you're muddying yourself, moving along and you're in the throes of the late-stage interviews, don't think that we're not still looking for candidates and still talking to other people. And so really be vigilant and really try to stay on top of that process. Do you focus on relationships? Both, at the end when you're negotiating, I talk a lot about relationships there, but also during the interview process for the long term, and then also early on so that you hear about those jobs, when they open up. I had a client who recently got a job because she had gone through an interview process, got a job, it was rescinded because of budget, and she kept in touch with the recruiter. The recruiter then left, and she kept in touch with that person in the new job. She's actually going for a recruiting job, so it makes sense to keep in touch with the recruiter as opposed to the hiring manager. And she found that recruiter again in her new company, kept in touch with her, and got a job there. So you can see that that whole thing was relationship-based. And then finally, do you have enough information? Again, audit your search. I mean, just be honest with yourself again. Do you have those contacts where you can access that hidden job market? Do you know how to position yourself during interviews? So when I was droning on and on about positioning yourself and being able to ask these 3 questions and, understanding how stylistically you would want to frame that for the target market, if you are unsure about your job search technique, go to our blog, read some advice articles, go to Ivy Exec for their advice articles, go to your alma mater, or go to your current school if you're currently in school. Do something to get your job search technique up to snuff, because this is the way the process works. And again, do you have enough information to negotiate wisely and to onboard, to get into that job? Because the job search ends really for both of us when you are doing well in your job. I will always, it doesn't end for me, when my clients get hired. I do circle back to them. I want to make sure that they are successful, because if they're not successful, starting off their job, they're not going to remember this as being a successful job search. They're going to think of it as, as perhaps a mistake in their career. So, Would love for you to stay in touch with me. Would love to hear how you're doing on your search. That is my phone number, 212-501-2234. Our website, SixFigureStart.com, and I think Alex is going to send that in a follow-up email. My direct email is Caroline@SixFigureStart.com. We have a free newsletter that gets emailed twice a month. And in that newsletter, career advice articles, advance notice of events that we do, including subscriber-only events. So we have our next subscriber-only teleclass coming up towards the end of June. It's called Get Ready for the Job Boom, because we are expecting, again, an uptick in the market. So the information to register for that is only distributed through the newsletter, so sign up. You'll get the newsletter, and you'll see that. We post to our blog a lot more frequently than twice a month. That's where some of the articles that the advice that I referenced, the comprehensive interview examples, is on the blog. We're on Twitter and Facebook, LinkedIn, all the usual suspects. Coaching to Go are some audio recordings of workshops that we've done. So I've referenced a lot of different topics. You can look on our website, look at the topic, look at the audios. We do group coaching. It meets once a week by teleconference. And so covering a lot of different topics. And then, of course, the most customized is to have one-on-one coaching with a coach. All of our coaches are former recruiters like myself. So I can see already that we have some questions that have trickled in. So, Alex, should I just plow through the questions as much as I can? Or
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely start at question 1, and then we can work our way down the list as far as we can get.
Yeah. So the first question is best way to address long employment gaps due to the recession. So, I have to say that I think that recruiters are a little bit more compassionate. We recognize that it's a tough market, but it's a tough market, and I've been spending all this time just looking for jobs still isn't going to be a competitive answer. So you want to say that you've been doing something, whether it's pro bono consulting or personal development or a lot of reading to keep up on the markets or keep up on whatever sector it is that you're working on. Someone with a long gap is someone who isn't probably going to be a good candidate for getting through the resume screen. So recognize that about yourself. Look, I mean, maybe you just let your job search get away from you, and again, you could be a perfectly good candidate and have a gap on your resume, but that still means that you're going to have to focus more on networking and less on recruiters and job postings because that's just not going to be, you're not going to be picked up as a candidate through a resume screen when you have a long gap. How does an individual enter into the financial sector, M&A, private equity, or VC, post an MBA if he or she does not have previous experience in the financial sector? So I would put that under the file of career change. So like I said before, unlikely to get through to a resume screen. Lots of, I would say VC, private equity, they are very relationship-based businesses. They don't post jobs. They don't have to post jobs. They'll pick up the phone and they'll call someone. I know I have a friend, and not someone that I coached, but I have a friend. I tell this story to everyone because it's such a great story. He was a scientist, a PhD in molecular biology, and he wanted to work in VC. And he contacted every former PhD in molecular biology that was doing something else other than research or lab work to find out how they did their career change. And he let them know that he was looking to break into financial services, specifically VC. And he was able to work his way into an investment banker who actually recommended and said, that's going to be a really wide gap for you. You need to have some analytical training, and he recommended banking or consulting. And this person, made an introduction for him. And this PhD got a consulting job in the investment banking practice of a major strategy firm, and then parlayed that into VC. So it's going to be networking that's going to enable you to do that. You're going to have to get in front of someone who is compassionate with your story. So think about, whatever unique angles you have. I myself am a career changer. My first career was classical piano, so you can bet that when I was doing my career change, I was reaching out to classical pianists who then did something else. Question 3, what approach should one follow while applying to the companies in this sector? So I am not sure what one means by that sector. Are you thinking about the financial sector? So, you know, there are really just 3 approaches, if you will. I mean, one is working with a recruiter, one is, you know, responding to a job posting, and one is networking your way in, either through a personal introduction, a warm introduction, or networking cold, like my PhD friend did when he literally just called people who he happened to find out had PhDs and were doing something else. So there are really only 3 or 4, if you count that as 4 things, ways of approaching, of applying for a job. And like I said, recruiters and job postings accounts for 15 to 20%, so definitely spend your time accordingly. Approximately how many resumes are received or considered for opening? It totally depends on the company. So obviously brand name companies, you're talking about thousands and thousands of resumes. Again, you know, I always tell people employment is binary. Okay, you are either employed or not employed. So it's 0 or 100% employment. It doesn't matter if the market is telling you it's 20%, 50%, 75%. If you have a job, it's 100% employment for you, lucky duck. So that is what you need to focus on. Don't focus on the competition. Focus on getting yourself seen. What is the best way to, no, I answered that question already. So I must have toggled back up. I keep getting calls from a new type of headhunter. They want $8,000, oh my goodness, to assist in getting a new job. Okay, that is a scam. Recruiters will never charge you to introduce you to folks. Oh, I get so angry when I see that. No, that is absolutely, that is illegal. So don't let anyone charge you money for, you know, access to jobs. I'm not talking about a membership site that, you know, gives you things like this. I mean, like an Exec or a Vault.com, where you then, you know, you get advice and you get job listings in addition to advice and webinars and stuff. I'm talking about things where they say, you know, give me several $1,000s and I'll introduce you to folks. No, no, no. When I recruited externally, I was paid, of course, by my hiring clients, by the companies paid me, not the employees. So that's definitely just run the other direction. We won't even talk about that. With the automated screening tools that are currently used, Taleo, yes. Are there things you can do to improve your chances of not getting screened out of an opportunity? So again, I mean, those are really best used for when I was doing a search for Disney ABC and I was looking for an After Effects animator. Yes, there's a job that's like that. After Effects is a specific software. So it was very easy for me to filter for After Effects. I mean, you either knew After Effects and you listed it or you didn't. That was a type of search where I felt very, very safe using resume filtering software. When I was looking for an engagement manager for the healthcare practice of a major strategy consulting firm, you know, maybe I would filter for healthcare, pharma, biotech, but even then I felt like I'd get a lot of false negatives. It was just easier for me to skim. A lot of it is going to depend. A recruiter's methods in terms of winnowing out, you know, applicants is going to depend on the type of position, how senior the position is, how new the industry is. So, and Alex, maybe you can answer this question. You know, I did a workshop for you guys earlier on troubleshooting your search. I did talk about some of the things that, you know, that you can look at in terms of how to do that. I mean, that recording is on my website. And then, Alex, I don't know if it's on the Ivy Exec site somewhere saved, or if that has just gone and passed. Do you know?
We actually have not yet posted it on our website, but definitely we would recommend going to SixFigureStart to get access to that. We'll definitely have the recorded webinars made available shortly on our website.
At some point, yeah. So, you know, troubleshooting your job search, it's on my website at this point. And that's where I talk about, you know, the 3 stages of where a search can break down and where you might be able to see yourself. Thank you notes, email or personalized snail mail. Email, because snail mail is too slow. There are so many large corporations where the mail just never comes. I mean, it's amazing. I once sent a very, very nice handwritten note to a mentor of mine who took me out for lunch. We used to go out to lunch maybe twice a year. He got my note the day before our next lunch, so it took him 6 months. The nicest touch is you send the email quickly, nice email, and then follow up with a personalized, longer note, because an email can't be all that long. So if you want to put something that's much more involved, like maybe a proposal of different ideas, that's something that you might want to follow up, in the mail with a hard copy or with an attachment, perhaps to the email. But, if you did want to do that personal touch, I would say absolutely send something snail mail, but send something quickly by email just in case the snail mail really never comes. How do I handle a situation where after an interview is completed, the interviewer asks me to let them know if I receive another offer? What response should I expect from them if I let them know of a likely offer? Well, do you have a likely offer? Here's the thing. You want to be, honest. I would never, not ever, not ever mention the name of any sorts of companies that you're interviewing with, even if the interviews are over or got offers from, even if you turned them down. You just want to maybe describe what they're like. So, I always wanted to know where you were interviewing because I wanted to make sure that we were on the right track here. If I said to you, if I'm interviewing for, say, Time Inc., and I said, so where else are you interviewing? And you tell me Goldman Sachs and McKinsey and Toys R Us, and I'm going to be thinking, what? But if you mention Hearst and Condé Nast, okay, now I know we're on the right track. Or, again, don't mention specific names. You can say major publishing companies, magazine publishing companies, media companies, including magazine publishing as well as book publishing as well as whatnot. That's the best answer, right? Because I'm looking for the names to vet and make sure that you're on the right track. So I know that we're at the top of the hour. Alex, I wasn't sure if you had any closing remarks.
Yep,
try to get as many questions as possible.
Yeah, I know, and we had quite a few more to go, but thank you so much, Caroline. Definitely those of you who did not have your questions answered, we highly recommend that you connect with Caroline through her website. You see her phone number and her contact information there. We'll be sure to provide that contact information in our follow-up email to you all as well. In addition to Caroline's contact information, we'll also include a link to the full recording for the webinar, both the audio and the video, of course. And so you'll have that to review for your review moving forward as well. And just in terms of closing, I want to thank again Caroline and SixFigureStart for being with us today for yet another time. Certainly the insights that Caroline has been able to provide us will be really well received by our members, and we're certainly looking forward to those of you who attended our webinar tonight, as well as those of you who may have attended our previous webinars. We're really glad to see that we're getting such a great turnout from them, and that the content that we're able to bring to you has been value add. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, which will be on June 22nd, I believe. And we'll have that information on our website shortly for you. So with that, everyone else, thank you so much. Have a great day, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Thank you so much, guys.
Great. Thanks, Alex.